Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth is the Only Armor. And in this video, I want to briefly discuss the question of whether or not suicide is selfish. It's a question that tends to come up pretty frequently, and there's kind of elements of it that are taboo. And I've also noticed in my life that people tend to come down very hard one way or the other. And my answer, the shortest answer I can possibly muster, is that it's really complicated. But I bet I can flesh out the complications a little bit in the next few minutes here. If you've seen my Truth is the Only Armor video, you know that when I talk about suicide, I usually work with a couple of core assumptions, right? One, you're only ever contemplating suicide. You're usually contemplating suicide as a means to end your own unbearable suffering. And you know that in so doing, you will cause other people pain. If you take those two principles seriously, then suicide becomes obviously contradictory if we assume that if we also assume that all of our suffering is equal and we can't and I can't elevate my suffering and importance over or below anyone else's, right? So the selfishness or non-selfishness of suicide is affected by these assumptions, right? If someone does complete taking their own life and it carries out the logical contradiction that I'm talking about here, there is a selfishness to that, or it seems like there is, right? There is that elevation of one's own pain and importance above the pain that you will cause in your suicide. And I think there is a selfishness to that. And I think people who haven't thought about it very much tend to see that contradiction right away and kind of latch onto it like it's extremely selfish, et cetera, et cetera. But there's another school of thought based really, really deeply in the medical model of mental illness, where depression and or anxiety or whatever else is going on are sort of theorized as the main cause of the suicide. And it's an illness. It was a death caused by an illness, and you wouldn't blame anyone for dying of cancer, right? So that argument sort of tends to end up with a different conclusion, which is that calling a suicide selfish is ableist and kind of betrays a lack of understanding of what mental illness is and what it does. I think that, as with most really hard questions, the truest way of thinking about it is somewhere in the middle. Here's why. I do think that suicide is selfish in that I take myself seriously when I say that suicide is inherently an act that elevates one's own suffering above that of other people. And I don't think that it's really useful to deny that that is selfish. When we say the word selfish, that's the sort of thing we mean. But I also don't think that it's wrong to question that based on the sort of the way that the suicidal moment really robs us of a lot of our willpower. We need to, the truth is the only armor because we need armor for the type of intense fight that the suicidal moment requires of us. And I don't want to minimize how incredibly difficult it is to survive moments like that. That, as I said in my Truth is the Only Armor video, it's a very, very heavy lift to find the integrity to survive the suicidal moment, and many people can't find it. And it's important to not sort of disgrace the memory of people who succumb to the suicidal moment, to the many people who succumb to the suicidal moment. On the other hand, I think it's really important not to completely erase the selfishness of suicide for this reason. The second main assumption that I always have about suicide, as I've said many times, is that you're going to cause other people pain. Presumably your friends, your family, or someone else are going to be left behind to make sense of what really can't be made sense of because it's inherently contradictory. And we need to be able to honor those people too, and respect the full expression of their anger, their grief. And if they're angry because they feel that their loved one's suicide was selfish, I really don't think we get to wave that away by calling them ableist. I think that that is a harmful erasure of part of the expression of that person's grief. And I don't think that the difficulty of surviving the suicidal moment gives license to block out anger felt by people left behind. That's really all I've got to say about this. It's a short video where I just wanted to tease apart some of the complexities of this question, because I see, as I said, a lot of people coming down very hard one way or the other. And I think that the issue demands respectful consideration from multiple sides. And I hope that I have been able to sort of get that ball rolling for you today. Thanks very much for your time as always, and I wish you all the best.